Hi hires, so we're looking at the Sustainability and Interdependence Unit, in particular food supply and food security. Okay, so we're going to start with what we actually mean by food security. And food security is made up of three parts. A nice wee Venn diagram for you, and food security means that you have all of these, so this crossover point here. Okay, now these can be quite varied in terms of exactly how they affect someone. So if you're talking about someone in Scotland, if you are an elderly person who lives in a rural location, their physical access might actually be an issue. We definitely have people who have economic access as an issue because they don't have enough money for the food. But we also have a major issue with quality in certain areas, because you might have plenty of food and you might be able to get it, but it's not giving you a healthy diet. And the quantity is kind of self-explanatory. Enough food always available, and there are literally millions and millions of people on this planet who don't have food security for whatever reason. One of these things is missing, or two or three, and it's a major problem. Okay, so why is food security important? Well, this is your big deal. If you don't have food security, you have unhealthy people, and unhealthy people have other impacts on society, and you can fix this if you have good food security. But our biggest issue for food security is that we are increasing the number of people we have. Our population is now huge, and we don't have everybody in that population with good food security, so therefore we have a lot of health issues that are impacted by it. Okay, so here is our terrifying numbers. 7 billion in 2011. Okay, now today is Christmas Eve. 2020, and I went and looked this up this morning, so here we go. This is our current number, so it's gone up by 0.8 billion since 2011, and terrifyingly as well for me. Okay, this, I looked up another one, which you can put in your date of birth, and it will tell you how many people approximately were on the planet on your date of birth. Here we go, I'm 46, so in my lifetime the population has doubled. Okay, this website is fascinating. Go have a look at that if you want to see some of the numbers. Okay, but it's just going up and up and up. So the projection is we hit 8 billion by 2023, 9 billion by 2037, 10 billion by 2055. Now, we are struggling to feed the people we have now on this planet, so something is going to have to change about how we feed people. So we're looking at a doubling, 3 billion to 6 billion. Now this is in some people's lifespans, comfortably people's lifespan, and it's still going up. Now these numbers the growth rate has actually gone down a little bit, but it's still going like 81 million people per year being added on, which is substantial. So how can you actually try and impact on food production? Because if our problem is we need enough food, you're going to have to look at how we deal with that. Now, first of all, just be absolutely clear in this, it is complicated, and there are specific areas that will have particular issues that will make it even more complicated. So we can look at things like competition, so weed killers, herbicides, specific things that are trying to control food production for that. Also other pests and other animals that might be an issue. So pest control, big deal. Depending on where you are, you might have too much or too little water, so irrigation, drainage, major issue. High yield cultivars, so if you can actually choose exactly what you're growing, that can make a vast difference, and this would include your genetically modified crops. This is a bit National 5e. Your soil nutrients, so fertilizers, what do you need to add, that kind of thing, and your soil profile. Now that you may have looked at a little bit if you're doing geography, you might have looked at this. This is to do with exactly how much of a layer you have that is good for growth. Is it a clay soil, all that kind of thing. And disease. So all of these things, every single one of these impacts on food production, and science has a huge impact on what we understand of each of these things. Okay, so looking at just one part of the jigsaw, but I think quite a fascinating one, because this is something you can't just turn around and say, right, well, everybody grows crops, because not all soils are capable of supporting that. So we've got two different maps here. So on our first one here, we have arable agriculture. So you can grow a wide range of crops, and you'll notice that there's a huge area in the middle, nothing of that. It's all kind of round the outside of the east coast. We've got some tiny little spots over on the west, but mainly we're on the east coast. Okay, on the other side we have mixed agriculture. So this can restrict some, but it's not bad. But what I would say is, look at this section here, and you go, well, on both of these are massive areas of, I'll do this one in black so you can see the difference in that one. These are massive areas of conurbations. This is basically the central belt. It's got virtually everyone who lives in Scotland is in there. And you go up the side here and you're going, well, there's some major kind of cities coming up the side here as well. So we're living where actually we could maybe use agricultural land. And that is another issue with what's going on. And if we look at the next, okay, so the last two we have here are more of the larger areas of Scotland, so the areas which are white in the other two maps. And in fact, you look at this one and you go, wow, look at all of that one that's been coloured in, and all across here. You know, so we have virtually the entirety of Scotland in rough grazing. So rocky, boulder, strewn ground, they're saying, so limited agricultural value. And on the other side, we've got improved grassland, so you can potentially use for some grasses. Okay, but really what that's showing you is our agricultural land that we have is not suitable to turning around and saying, right, we all go arable. It's not an option. But what we can use it for is for grazing. And that's why obviously sheep farming and things are much more common in Scotland than arable. So this is very, very specific. A huge amount of detailed surveys have been done to look at exactly what soil types are like in all sorts of places. So this is some detail near us. So we are here, and you can see very, very clear areas where it's all been kind of mapped out, and then there's a kind of key which gives you exactly what's going on. And basically you have a little bit up here, it says arable, permanent pastures, so what you could use here. But then you're getting into things that are saying, again, grassland but permanent pastures, dry, starting to have problems down here for it to use it as anything other than grazing. So our types of food production are very much defined by the place where we live, and you cannot put a one-size-fits-all onto food production, and that's why it gets really complicated. So here's another problem. This is really just Nat 5 revision, but to remind, as we go up on a food chain, then we use some of that energy, and it can't always be passed on. And you should know that's from heat, it's from movement, any undigested waste, and any growth that is indigestible, so like bones and things like that. And so you only actually get a tiny amount of energy being passed on, and that the number from Nat 5 was about 10%, so it's not a huge amount at all. So how are you going to feed everyone if you have an extended food chain? And this is one of the things that we might consider. Here's your pyramid of energy, again just to remind you. So we start with a huge amount in the sunlight, and then we've got less in the producers, less in the primary, less in the secondary, less in the tertiary. This is doing a very, very neat 10%, although obviously less from here. Okay, so I'm not sure how I feel about this. I think I would be okay about eating grasshoppers. I think I would prefer if they have been ground up and just made into a protein powder or flour that can be used in other food production. But there is a lot of science behind this, which makes a lot of sense. If you're taking 10 kilograms of feed in this example, you're getting to 9 kilograms of the insect, but only 1 kilogram of beef conversion. And you've got a similar kind of profile. You have, and this one, in fact, you would argue that the grasshopper is maybe healthier because you have less fat production from this one. It's something which is being looked at, and there's real reason for it, because it's very easy to mass produce insects, And in some cultures it's perfectly normal. In ours it's not, but maybe we need to go there. I don't know if you've heard about Meat-Free Mondays. This is just basically encouraging you to eat less meat and be a bit more veggie, and by doing that you're reducing the food chain, okay, because it kind of goes along the line of, okay, if we've got grain going to chicken, going to human, then that is a 10% energy, and then only 1% gets to the human. If you take the grain and you go straight to the human, then obviously that's 10%. So this would be allowing you to use the land more efficiently, given obviously that you can't always grow arable crops and vegetables on the land. Sometimes the best use of it is for meat. Here's another one, mealworms. I'm again not totally convinced, but I do understand why that might be an argument. Okay, the last couple of things to think about that I've got up here. I've got an article from last year on meat and dairy intake, and one from the year before about a large-scale report that's been produced from a lot of people, WHO and various other people involved in this, to try and count and work out basically how much we need to feed 10 billion people and what diet would actually work to feed 10 billion people. And they've got this term flexitarian, which is basically quite a bit more veggie, fish, and a little bit of meat, not a huge quantity of meat. And that kind of links to this one here, which is saying that we should be looking to cut down our meat intake a bit. By a fifth, they're saying, which is quite a lot, depending on what your diet currently is. So there is a lot of argument about all of these, in particular because this is talking about climate change and exactly what impact agriculture has. Precisely how much of an impact it has is very hotly contested, and but there's some interesting science out there on it. Okay, so that's the idea of food security, and that's all we're looking at today.